Hello everyone. So today we're gonna watch some short films, horror ones, scary ones, and give you my reaction to them. I don't know. I haven't went live on here or made any video in like 7 months, so it's about to be Halloween. My birthday just passed, October 19th. I turned 33, so it's almost Halloween, so I decided to do this. So yeah, let's get into it. This one's called Double Vision. Yeah, I'm gonna skip the ads. Oh, hell no. Hell no, I would freak the fuck out, bro. Hell no. That shit's weird. That's crazy. Alright.
Hey there. So,
On to the next one. Mama Anges. Doppelganger is a biologically unrelated look-alike or double of a living person.
Mom?
Hey, sweetie.
You're home early. I thought you weren't supposed to be back till next week.
Oh?
Is everything okay?
Yes. Everything is fine.
Hey, sweetie. How's it going? Sorry I missed your call. You look like you've seen a ghost, girl. What's going on? Sweetie? Baby, what's going on, sweetie? What's going on with you? Sweetie?
Hell nah. Skinwalker. Two cowboy brothers investigate the disappearance of their townsfolk in the cold woods of northern Arizona, only to find they are the ones being haunted by something not quite an animal or human. I might take a minute here soon and go make some popcorn. Or something to snack on.
God, Barry! Oh my God. What the fuck happened?
I'm gonna watch a couple more of these and we're gonna move over to scary stories.
Will you cut it out?
I'm really sorry, brother. It's the only way I could find out for sure. I knew you'd try to stop me. It was gonna get messy. Now you and your girl wait right here. We figure out what the fuck is happening.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing?
You scream, and I'll put a fucking bullet in your chest. You understand?
Fuck you, crazy bastard!
I am not dying tonight, so shut up!
Point that gun at me, brother? Better fucking beat me. Can you explain yourself?
I saw the bodies, Jason. I found them. You weren't right.
What the hell are you talking about?
I've seen animal killings before. Bears, cougars, all of it. It ain't pretty. But this was something different.
All of them were dead? And you think I did it? What the hell did you drink last night? You can't think I kidnapped all them people?
I know you didn't, brother.
Are you out of your goddamn mind? Huh?
I'm almost sure.
We're hunting an animal. An animal, Arthur! Don't look at her, look at me.
These things.
What things? What things?
You gotta let them hunt you. I had my suspicions about her, so I allowed her to tag along.
She wanted to help, you idiot! She wanted to be with me.
see how she's got you, Jason. She's been hunting us.
Wait, stop! Right, okay? I have fallen for her. But trust me, I know her. This isn't you. You wouldn't do this. Please. I've known you my whole life, Arthur. You're a good man. Please. I want to marry her one day.
I'm gonna make this fast for you.
Get off me! Come here.
Where is she?
What the fuck?
You see? I told you.
You fucking killed her?
She was a damn skinwalker.
Mary?
Wait.
Quiet, please. Yes.
Jason. It's me. Jason.
It's me. It's always been me.
Hell no. Oh god. Oops. We're gonna
My
stand here
girlfriend
for
and
an
I
hour.
recently moved into our new house. It's honestly the home we've been dreaming of, the perfect fit for us. We have a cat named Bella, whom we rescued together, so everything felt perfect when we first moved in. The only downside at first was the house to our right. It looked abandoned, as the owner had started renovating it but never finished. The layout of the house is such that on our right there's a space for the entrance to our back garden, and next to that is the abandoned house's entrance to its back garden. There's no fence separating the two, as the owner removed it to install a new one but never completed the job, leaving both back gardens with open access. Behind the abandoned house is another property separated by a fence. From what we could see, several young men lived there. Occasionally, when we returned home, we'd see them cutting through the neighbor's back garden to reach the front of the street. We didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they knew the owner and had permission. Fast forward to our first night in the new house. We were sitting in the back garden, enjoying the space, and looked up at the houses behind us, just out of curiosity. That's when we noticed a man staring blankly at us from a window. He wasn't hiding it, he made it very obvious. There was no expression on his face, and the room was dark, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. We assumed he was just curious about his new neighbors, but after half an hour of that blank stare, we decided to go inside. The next few days were normal. I went to work, and my fiancée continued unpacking. One night, we decided to sit in the garden again. It was dark, but we enjoyed looking at the stars and having deep conversations, until we heard the makeshift wooden board fence being moved. 3 men appeared, standing there, staring at us. "Are you okay?" I asked, knowing they wouldn't leave unless I said something. The youngest looking one, around 29, was holding a big bag, and we had no idea what was inside. He offered us some stolen washing up tablets, which we declined. I made a joke about it because the situation felt so awkward. He smiled and said okay, and then they left. What struck me was how they just let themselves into our garden without saying anything, like as if they had every right to be there. We went back inside, thinking it was a one-off, but it all started getting worse from there. They began helping themselves into our garden more often and acting in ways that were clearly meant to intimidate us. They would get into the next door house by lifting up the fence that separated the back gardens and walking through. I forgot to mention, my girlfriend and I are both 20 years old, so of course the idea that they might be trying to intimidate us as 2 young women was the first thing that crossed our minds. One day, while I was cleaning the front room, 2 police officers came around the side of our house and entered the abandoned garden. They lifted up the fence and looked around for a few minutes before leaving without saying anything. I thought it was strange, but continued with my day, assuming maybe the people next door were trouble. A few days later, the police knocked on our door. They explained that the house behind us was now vacant. The men had been kicked out for antisocial behavior, apparently not just towards us, but with other neighbors too. Honestly, we were relieved. Even though they hadn't physically done anything yet, it meant they wouldn't get the chance to escalate things. We continued settling into the house, but one day, while I was in the bath, I heard a loud bang outside. I quickly got dressed and ran to find my girlfriend. I found her recording something from our spare bedroom window, which faces the garden of the now empty house. I asked what was going on, but she shushed me. After a moment, she explained. A man we had never seen before pointed up at our bedroom window, and when she noticed him, he sprinted full speed toward our house. He tried our door handle on the way past, then ran back into the garden, threw the broken fence up, and started banging on all the windows of the empty house. We called the police immediately. They came, watched the video, took a statement, and left. We were shaken. Why would they try our door handle and then break into that house? What was he planning?
That's
A
creepy.
few nights later, while we were in bed, we heard whistling. The kind of whistle men use to harass women. It was 2:16 a.m. We listened quietly, and then heard someone tapping on our window. Terrified, we checked the cameras, but for some reason, they didn't record anything. Whoever it was must have left shortly after because the noises stopped. We were too scared to sleep, so the next day, we went to my mom's and stayed the night. When we returned the following morning, we noticed our Ring doorbell had been removed and placed on the floor. The SD card was gone. Someone had clearly come back, and we knew who it was. Who else would do that? We called the police again, and they told us to keep all the doors and windows locked. The woman on the phone even said that the removal of the camera could be a sign that they were planning something, which terrified us even more. But at least she was honest. The whistling, banging, and attempts to re-enter the house continued for weeks. We made multiple police reports. They never tried our door again, so we hoped it was over. But 3 weeks later, while in bed watching funny clips from our camera, we checked the live feed. That's when we saw a man outside, wearing a black mask covering his mouth and nose, with his hood up, standing in front of our garden with his arms spread wide, like he was imitating Jesus on the cross. He stared up at our bedroom window with his head tilted. We froze. At the time, we had moved the camera inside the house, so it didn't record. We were so shaken we didn't even think to screen record. He then spoke, but we couldn't hear what he said. Then he turned around, walked to the opposite side of the street, and just stood there, staring at our house for about 30 minutes. We called the police again. They said it wasn't illegal to stare at someone's property and dismissed the whole thing, even when we told them what he did on our lawn. They made us feel like we were overreacting. We couldn't sleep for days. Any noise outside terrified us, even normal ones. Then, one night at 2:52 a.m., we got a notification.
Fucking moving.
I woke my girlfriend and said, "Someone's outside, I know it. Please check the camera." She did, and there they were. Two masked men coming from the side of our house, shining flashlights into our windows. One of them, the same man who had been harassing us, was holding what looked like a crowbar. Why us? What was the point of this? For days on end, he would stand across the street, pointing, waving, or shouting things up at our window. Every time we looked, he would stare blankly at us. It was clearly meant to scare us, and it worked. We kept contacting the police, but they've done very little. The harassment continues. We've got cameras now, and we record everything, but we feel powerless. Just earlier today, he stood outside again, staring up at us. We got it on video. We're absolutely terrified, but we'll update if anything else happens. Let me preface this by saying I'm not crazy. I know how this is gonna sound. Paranoid, unhinged, delusional, but I swear, everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. It started with a face, or more accurately, faces that all looked just slightly off. 3 months ago, I ended a relationship with my ex, Caleb. We'd been together almost 2 years, and the breakup was long overdue. Caleb wasn't violent or anything, he never hit me, but he was controlling and possessive in that low-key and calculating kind of way. Perhaps the worst kind of way. He'd do things like track when I'm on my phone and quiz me on things I'd done that day to see if I'd give the same answer twice. After I left him, I changed my number, disabled my social media, and even moved apartments. I thought I was in the clear. Then came the barista. It was a Tuesday morning. I stopped by this little hole-in-the-wall coffee shop near my new place. I'd only been there once or twice. As I stepped up to the counter, the barista, a girl about my age, smiled at me, but something about her expression made me pause. She tilted her head and said, "Good morning, sunshine." I froze because that was Caleb's nickname for me. It was not a common one. He used to say it sarcastically whenever I was upset, like, "What's wrong, sunshine?" He enjoyed pushing buttons. I brushed it off, maybe it was a coincidence, but then it happened again. A few days later, I took a ride share to work. A different driver than usual, older guy, maybe in his 50s. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror like he was trying to recognize me, and then he asked me if I ever figured out what I was running from. He said it as casual as could be.
Sleepy.
I simply responded, "What?" And he just chuckled and shook his head, like I was in on some
You
joke.
hear loud noises in the
Caleb said
background.
that
It's
to
my
me
cat's
once.
playing.
After I told him I needed time to figure myself out, he leaned in, dead serious, and asked, "Ever figure out what
Getting
you're
into
running
everything.
from?" Now, 2 strangers have repeated things he said, word for word. It kept happening. A woman at the grocery store bumped into me and whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A guy on the street said, "Still wearing your hair like that," as he passed. Another one, someone who worked in my building, said, "You always liked this song," while humming the exact tune Caleb used to play when we argued. It wasn't their faces that freaked me out, it was the way they looked at me, like they knew me, or at least thought they did. They all had different faces, but their eyes all had the same expressions. I started thinking I was going crazy. I mean, what else could explain it? So I did something I wasn't proud of. I contacted Caleb. Not directly. I sent a message to his sister. I told her to tell him to stop. I figured maybe he hired a private investigator. Maybe he was stalking me or pulling strings, telling people things about me. I just wanted it to stop. She texted back the next day. saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. Caleb's in rehab. He's been there for 6 weeks with no phone." I didn't believe her. I thought she was covering for him. That is, until I saw a picture she posted of him on Facebook a week later, looking pale and sunken in, holding one of those one-day sober chips. So it couldn't be Caleb, or at least not directly. I couldn't shake the feeling that these strangers knew things they shouldn't, though. One night, I stayed late at work. I didn't want to go home because my apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Not that anything bad happened inside of it, I just didn't like being alone. Around 10 p.m., I finally called it a night. I walked the 10 minutes to my place, keeping my head down, headphones in, but no music playing. Something I learned to do so I could still hear if someone was following me. When I turned the corner onto my block, I saw someone sitting on the stoop of the building across from mine. A young man with his hoodie up but his head down. I almost ignored him until he spoke. He said, "Cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" I stopped walking. He didn't look at me, he just stared at the sidewalk like he was reading something on it. I slowly walked past and didn't say a word. When I reached my building, I went upstairs and locked every bolt on the door. I sat on the couch for hours, just listening to nothing. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to find my doormat flipped over. That might not sound like a big deal, but I live alone, and the door to my unit is on the top floor. You don't just accidentally walk by my place. The underside of my mat had something scribbled in pen. It said, "You can change your face too if you want, but I'll still recognize you." I didn't know what it meant, but I still threw up. That day, I
Damn.
booked a hotel
What
for
the
the
fuck?
weekend. I left my apartment without packing anything. I didn't feel safe even grabbing clothes. I just needed to be somewhere crowded. The hotel clerk gave me a room on the 4th floor. It was small, quiet, and kind of stuffy, but it felt safe. But only until around 2 a.m., when someone knocked on my door. There were 3 slow knocks. I sat up in bed and waited. They knocked again eventually. I peeked through the peephole, and it was a woman, maybe in her 40s. Her face was totally blank and expressionless. She was just staring straight at the door. She didn't say anything, so I didn't make a sound, and eventually she left. It was one of the most disturbing things I'd ever seen. The next morning, I asked the front desk if someone had come by to my room. They said no one should have been up there, especially that late. All the rooms on my floor were vacant. That's when it clicked. These weren't random people. They were being sent and fed my details. They were given phrases Caleb used. But if it weren't Caleb, who would do it? And why? I thought about Caleb in rehab, about his obsession with control and making sure I was never fully gone. He didn't need to be the one knocking, he just needed to send others to do it. So I started digging. There was one conversation I remembered from months before the breakup. Caleb talking about a forum he was on, a place where people shared tactics. He made it sound like it was for productivity or self-improvement. I don't remember the name of it. Honestly, I don't think he ever gave me the name. But in retrospect, it sounded like some creepy, cultish
Oh,
roleplay
no.
crap. Except it's happening to me for real. Someone, probably Caleb, had hired people to say his words and mimic his patterns, so that even if he was out of my life technically, I'd still be constantly reminded of him. It wasn't stalking in the traditional sense. It was psychological graffiti. Like he was spraying himself onto strangers so I could never be sure who I was looking at. I don't think it's about watching me, but rather about making sure I never stop watching for him. I moved again and disappeared off social media again. I even dyed my hair. I told friends not to tell anyone where I was. It worked until last week. I was walking home from the bookstore, and a woman passed me on the street and said, "Still hiding behind books, sunshine?" She didn't stop walking even just to look at me. I don't think this will ever stop. Maybe he paid some crazy underground service to do this to me for a year, who knows? Maybe he made it public. Maybe this is some sick underground game now. Who can scare Sunshine the best? Who can get the closest without touching? I can't trust anyone's face anymore. The constant paranoia is truly eating away at my mental health.
Damn. I don't even know how to feel about that one. That's fucking crazy.
My family is a group of homebodies that don't travel, so everyone was surprised when my aunt proposed a trip to one of Michigan's Great Lakes. We agreed, wanting to create new memories together. My cousin booked a spacious Airbnb that could
Is she
somehow
getting
accommodate
Great
all
Lakes?
18 of us, which felt like a miracle considering the price. The house sat right on the beach, with gorgeous lake views that stretched for miles, almost like an ocean. Most of us claimed rooms in the main house, but because of our large group, some of us were placed in a second building directly behind it, a 2-story garage with bedrooms upstairs. My 3 cousins and I were assigned to sleep there. At first, we didn't think much of it. We spent most of the first day enjoying the hot tub, relaxing on the beach, and soaking in the scenery. It wasn't until night that we entered the garage for real. The space was outdated and neglected, with carpeted bathrooms that smelled like mold, stained bed linens, and a poorly secured latch on the door. Clearly, the cleaners focused on the main home and ignored the garage. My cousins were grossed out and refused to sleep on the beds unless
Alright,
we
I'll be
washed
right back, guys. I want to get a snack. My head is hurting. I need to eat something. Alright, I am back. What is up with my hat? Whoa. Alright. Got some cereal.
sheets, so I suggested we do laundry. The machines were small, so we could only do one set of bed sheets at a time, and it was obvious we'd be up late. We passed time upstairs, waiting for the first load. My cousin Maria complained about how he got stuck with the worst place, and as she spoke, I started to feel uneasy, like something bad was coming. I've had this feeling before, a rare kind of intuition that usually ends in a nightmare or something worse. I told my cousins to stay alert, and they listened, especially since we'd all experienced a break-in before when we lived in Detroit. Around midnight, the bell rang from the first floor, signaling the wash was done. I went downstairs alone, swapped the load into the dryer, and brought up the clean-smelling sheets. When my cousins saw how clean they were, they wanted their bedding washed too, so I kept going up and down between cycles doing everyone's sheets. At around 2:37 a.m., we were finally done. We made the beds, and were too tired to stay up any longer. My cousin Nikki insisted we leave the light on, and while they all fell asleep quickly, I stayed up doing some schoolwork on my phone. I'm a light sleeper, something that stuck with me since the break-in, and I remained hyper-aware of my surroundings even while half asleep. Then, around 3 a.m., a loud bang hit the garage door, like someone had thrown their body against it. I sat up, startled, but my cousins
Hell
didn't
no.
move. I tried telling myself it was just wind, though the noise was too heavy for that. Still, I stayed quiet and tried to sleep. But then it happened again, same deafening crash, this time shaking the garage door. The building trembled from the impact. I was fully awake now, watching the lamp-lit room as my cousins continued to sleep. No animal or gust of wind could cause that. 20
How the fuck
minutes
could
later,
they sleep
the
through
third
that?
boom hit. The garage shook again, and finally, 2 of my cousins bolted upright. I asked if they heard that, already knowing the answer. Nikki asked what that was, and I said I don't know, but this is the 3rd time I'm hearing it. We all agreed no wind could cause that sound. Nikki suggested texting her mom, my aunt, so we did. It was 4:11 a.m. when she responded, realizing something serious must be going on. She woke my uncle, who ran outside to check the property. We stayed upstairs, too afraid to move, until we heard knocking. It was my uncle at the door, and when we opened it, we saw him standing there with my dad and a few of our older male cousins. That's when I knew it was serious. There was no wind, no one playing around. My uncle told us to grab our things that were going to the main house. Then he said there was someone on the property, and that's what made my heart sink. I threw everything into my suitcase, and we all rushed out of the garage. Once inside the main house, most of the family woke up from the noise and commotion. We sat in the living room, trying to piece it all together. I told them about the first 2 loud crashes, and my cousins confirmed the 3rd. My aunt explained that when my uncle went out to investigate, she followed him. He shouted hey at someone standing behind the garage. The door to the main house slammed behind her right then, and there was no wind to explain it. She feared someone might have slipped into the house, so she ran to wake my dad and cousins. After searching, no one else was found inside. Then my uncle described what he saw. A man stood behind the garage, not hiding or moving, but staring like he wanted to be seen. When my uncle called out, the man didn't flinch. He simply walked away and vanished, not into the darkness, but into thin air. The leaves on the ground didn't crunch, and there were no footsteps left behind.
That was
My uncle's
creepy.
not someone who makes up stories either. He's a serious, logical man, which made everything scarier. My brothers added that they found 2 jester cards, one in the main house and one in the garage.
Oh,
The one in the garage was twisted and demonic looking. One cousin pointed out that jesters symbolize mockery, and loud sounds happened around 3 a.m., the so-called devil's hour. It was as if we were being taunted. My uncle had even checked for footprints, but saw only his and my cousin's, not the man's. Another cousin drove down the road during the incident to try and spot someone fleeing, but found no one. That day, no one returned to the garage. We squeezed into the main house, on floors, couches, anywhere there was room. My mom gave up her bed so we could sleep more comfortably. On the 2nd night, she slept on a couch by the large windows and woke around 4 a.m. to footsteps on the porch. She didn't dare open her eyes. She was afraid of seeing someone looking in. Then she heard someone trying the basement door. It had a weak lock, and my brothers and male cousins were sleeping down there. The door rattled as someone tried to break in. My mom rushed to the basement, but by the time she reached the beachside entrance, no one was there, and all the boys were still fast asleep. That was our last night. Though we planned to stay until Tuesday, we left Monday instead. On the way home, we couldn't
Is it
stop
haunted?
talking about what had happened. When my mom found out I had been going downstairs alone during laundry, she theorized that someone might have been watching me and thought I was alone in the garage. The time between my last trip downstairs and us going to sleep lined up way too well with the banging sounds. Theories started to form. Some of us thought it was a neighbor trying to scare us off. Others believed there was something paranormal, especially because of the jester cards. My aunt pointed out that
There's a lot of paranormal things
spotted them.
on the
This
Great
man didn't
Lakes.
run. He just watched and disappeared.
Unfortunately, a lot of people
Contacted the
that
Airbnb
go
host
in the
who
deep
claimed she'd reviewed
part
footage from the camera
of the
above
Great
garage door,
Lakes
but we never heard back.
sometimes disappear
It made us wonder, did she
into
know the
thin
man?
air.
Was he a neighbor? When we first arrived, my sister and cousin had walked the beach and passed a woman next door. She watched them coldly, without friendliness or a greeting. Just an
There
unfriendly
used to be a lot of
gaze.
pirates on the Great
The
Lakes,
house was
so
in the middle of nowhere, and we understood how constant Airbnb guests might annoy locals. But we were respectful. We didn't deserve what happened. This was our first family trip, and hopefully not our last.
alright, I'll
even
watch
after
like
everything we went through.
a couple more, and then I'm gonna get off here for the night. Here's Halloween ones. Oops. Sorry about the rave cat toy.
This happened 2 years ago on Halloween of 2023. I'm a 25-year-old male, but at the time of this story, I was 22. I had a long day of work due to a festival we had where we had parents bring their kids to the center for various activities, such as many
Shit, I
different
almost dropped
competitive
that.
games, a costume contest, trivia for candy, and a kids vs. parents dodgeball game. Overall, it was a very fun time, but it was definitely tiring. For context, I'm a community worker, so doing community events is pretty much what I do on a normal basis. But it's also draining, if that makes sense. Anyway, after it was all done, I went home and was ready to call it a night. About an hour after I got home, it was around 6-something, my little sister called me. My sister, who I'll call Savannah, wanted me to take her and my nephew, who I'll call Jackson, trick-or-treating, because neither our parents nor Jackson's parents felt like doing it. And as it usually goes, it fell on me to be the cool big brother to step in and make it happen. Savannah was 15 and Jackson was 11. Even though I wasn't feeling it at all, I got up, threw some clothes on, and headed to my parents' house to pick them up. Once I got there, I asked if they were ready, but Savannah was still finalizing her costume. She was dressed up as Raven from Teen Titans. She even had the white makeup on to give that ghostly appearance Raven usually has. Jackson was dressed as Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. Once Savannah was done, we got in the car and were on our way. I took them to a pretty busy neighborhood to make sure they got as much candy as possible. Upon arrival, we started going from house to house. Everyone we ran into was friendly and had plenty of treats to hand out. There was even one house where an older man gave them each a hot dog and a soda. He said every year for Halloween, he doesn't hand out candy. He grills food instead because he'd rather give kids something with protein since it's good for the body. Honestly, we probably need more people like that. We passed a lot of other kids, and some gave compliments to Savannah and Jackson's costumes. I also saw some really cool costumes myself. Everyone in the area seemed to go all out. When we hit the last house for the night, we started walking back to the car. It was about a 10-minute walk since we had gone pretty far down the neighborhood. The neighborhood was less active now, and there weren't as many people out and about. That's why I got alarmed when I looked across the street and saw a person dressed in all black, standing in a yard where there were no porch lights on. I'm surprised I even noticed them at all, but I tend to always pay attention to my surroundings. When I looked closer, it seemed like the person was wearing a hooded cloak with an all-black outfit and a mask because I couldn't see their face at all. I honestly couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Whoever it was, they appeared to be looking at us. I told Savannah and Jackson to stay close to me and said, "There's a suspicious person across the yard. Look, but don't stare." I said that so they could see who I was talking about without encouraging the person to approach or follow us. Jackson laughed and thought it was just someone trying to scare people walking by. Savannah, though, looked noticeably worried. Now, just to add some context, I was carrying a backpack with a Glock inside, and Savannah knew this. So when I told them to stay close, she probably realized I was being serious. Jackson was clueless. He's too young for me to tell him that I carry a real gun. As we were walking away, it looked like that person was still watching us, even though it was hard to tell in the dark.
Having a partner means you gotta trust them with your life.
You're in Boston now, Reagan.
Trust me, I've done this before.
I'm coming back like the prodigal son.
Is he stubborn?
Set in his ways.
It would be a problem if he wasn't right so often.
I am an acquired taste.
Boston Blue is all new CBS Friday 10/9 Central and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We were getting closer to the car when I suddenly heard heavy footsteps behind us, like boots hitting the concrete. I turned around and saw that same person again. Same outfit, all black. But this time, I could see more clearly. They were wearing a tactical vest, tactical boots, and black pants tucked into the boots. They had on a full spandex mask that completely covered their face. That made the situation way more serious. When you see someone dressed like that, the first thing that comes to mind is that they're armed. He's following us, I thought. I whispered to Savannah and Jackson, I need you both to listen very carefully. Do not stop walking and do not look back. The person I mentioned earlier is following us. They're behind us right now. The last thing we want is to alarm them or set them off, so just keep your composure and keep walking. I mainly looked at Jackson when saying this because he's younger and might not fully understand how serious this was. Savannah understood completely. We kept walking and did occasional glances behind us. The person stayed the same distance away, but was still following. When we got to the car, they were still coming our way. That's when I decided to make a bold move. I pulled out my Glock and pointed it at the person. I asked why they're following us. The person raised their hands, as if they didn't expect me to do that, then slowly removed their mask. It was a woman, and she looked to be in her 30s. She took her mask off, but didn't answer my question. She just stared at me blankly. I asked again, still pointing the gun, why are you following us? What she said next made no sense. In an almost robotic tone, she said, I'm an undercover cop. I was told there was a break-in, so I came to check it out. That's why I was standing outside that house. But when you looked at me funny, I assumed you were the one who did it. So it would be wise to lower that weapon, or I could have you arrested for threatening an officer of the law. I hesitated, but then lowered my gun. What else was I supposed to do? I didn't want to risk an arrest or ruin the kid's night, but her story didn't make any sense. She claimed she got word of a break-in, so why would she just stand outside facing away from the house? How did me looking at her funny make her think I was the one who did it? Why would I break into a house and then casually walk through the neighborhood? And why was she wearing a hooded cloak? All these questions were racing through my mind, so I asked her, if you're undercover, why are you in tactical gear? Wouldn't that kind of give away that you're law enforcement? And what's the point of the cloak? She didn't answer. She just stared at me again, but this time her expression changed. There was something malicious in her eyes, like she was irritated that I didn't believe her and was deciding what to do next. Jackson and Savannah stayed completely quiet through all of this. Then she smiled this creepy, unsettling smile and said, if you didn't have that gun, this night would have ended a hell of a lot different for you. Right as she finished saying that, I noticed 4 figures suddenly emerge from between the houses, walking toward us. All of them were wearing tactical gear, but without the cloak. I instantly told Savannah and Jackson to get in the car, keeping my eyes on the woman and the figures. Once I saw they were in, I got into and drove off. As I was leaving, the woman was still standing there, smiling. The others, 3 men and 1 woman, were not smiling. They had blank, emotionless faces, like they didn't even have souls. It's hard to explain.
Weird.
The whole car ride back was silent. I'm sure the kids were in shock, just like I was. I dropped them off, made sure they got in safely, then went home to process everything that happened. The thing I couldn't shake off was why they targeted us. The neighborhood was full of people walking around, so why us? I wish I could say it ended there, but it didn't. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was just a photo, no words. The picture was of my car, taken in the parking lot of my apartment complex. I contacted the police and told them everything that happened on Halloween night. They took the report, but they couldn't investigate unless a direct threat was made. Typical. Out of curiosity, and maybe stupidity, I went back to that same house where I first saw that woman. I knocked on the door, and a man in his 40s answered. I asked if they'd experienced a break-in on Halloween night. He looked confused and said no. He said he went to bed early because he had work the next morning and didn't notice anything strange. I told him what I saw, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I thanked him for his time and left. At that point, I already knew the undercover cop story was fake, but I wanted to do my own little investigation just to make sense of it. Whoever that woman and those people were somehow knew my phone number and where I lived. It makes me wonder, was that not a random encounter after all? Were they watching me for a while? Were they planning something that night, and my being armed threw them off? All those thoughts messed me up and made me feel paranoid for a long time. I had to go to therapy and install a Ring camera at my front door just to feel safe again. In case you're wondering, I haven't been contacted by any unknown numbers since. Nothing else has happened since that picture. 2 years later, I still think back on that night. Writing this out helps me a lot, and I'm trying to fully move on from it. But if there's one thing I want people to take away from this, it's to always watch your surroundings. You never know who might be watching you. It's easy to get caught up in something dangerous just for existing, so always stay safe and protected, because I can say with full confidence that being armed that night probably saved our lives.
Work-life balance with Betterment, the automated investing and savings app. We do the work, earning you more in a high-yield cash account, while you live your life. Make your money hustle with Betterment.
This happened when I was 12 years old. It was Halloween day, and my family was staying at a small family resort about an hour away from where we lived. My parents wanted to do something different that year instead of just walking around our neighborhood for trick-or-treating. The resort was holding a Halloween celebration that weekend with a bunch of activities, games, and even a haunted hayride. It wasn't a big place. It had maybe 10 cabins, a main lodge, a small lake, and a long open field where they set up hayrides and games. It was surrounded by woods on all sides. During the day, it looked normal, even kind of peaceful. But once it got dark, the woods looked black and creepy. The resort felt a little too quiet. We checked in early that afternoon. I remember walking into the cabin and feeling excited because I could smell campfire smoke and candy apples in the air. Kids were running around in costumes, even though it wasn't dark yet. My parents said the hayride was starting around 7, and there'd be games before that, so I went off to play while they unpacked. They had booths where you could toss rings over bottles for candy, a costume contest, and even a pumpkin carving area. Everything was decorated with orange lights and fake spider webs. I met another kid around my age there. His name was Ryan. He was wearing a skeleton costume and said he and his parents were staying in the next cabin over from ours. We played a few games together and got a good amount of candy. As it got closer to 7, we saw a crowd of families walking over to the hayride area. The tractor pulling the wagon was parked near a big barn, and they had hay bales lined up inside for people to sit on. There were maybe 20 of us who got on. The driver wore a scarecrow mask, and there were workers dressed like zombies who would jump out during the ride to scare people. The ride started out fun. It was dark by then, and they had torches lighting the dirt trail. The tractor moved slowly through the woods, and every now and then, someone in a costume would appear from behind a tree or run up to the wagon. Most people laughed or screamed and then laughed again. It felt like a normal Halloween attraction, but about halfway through, something made me uncomfortable. We were passing through a part of the trail that was darker than the rest. The tractor slowed down, and I looked toward the edge of the woods on my side. That's when I saw a man standing just outside the torchlight. He wasn't part of the hayride cast. I could tell that right away. He wasn't wearing a costume that fit the theme. From what I remember, he had a black jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He was just standing there, not moving, with his hands in his pockets. At first, I thought maybe he was one of the workers taking a break, but he wasn't doing anything. He was only watching. At one point, I made eye contact with him, or at least I think I did. Even though his face was shadowed, I could feel his eyes locked on me. I turned to look at the people around me to see if anyone else noticed, but no one seemed to. When I looked back, he was still there, in the exact same position. I tried to ignore it for the rest of the ride, but I kept thinking about him. When the hayride ended and everyone got off, I looked back one more time toward the woods. He was gone. I didn't mention it to anyone right then. I figured maybe I imagined it or overreacted. We went back to the lodge where they had more games and food. My parents sat by a bonfire while Ryan and I went around collecting candy. Everything seemed normal again. About an hour later, I saw him again. Ryan and I were standing near the snack table when I noticed someone off to the side of the crowd. It was the same man. He wasn't close, maybe 30 feet away, but he was standing near the tree line, watching again. There were a lot of people around, so it felt strange that he'd just be standing there alone. I remember my stomach tightening when I realized he was looking in my direction. I tried to get a better look at his face, but it was hard because of the lighting. I could make out a short beard, and I think his hat had some kind of logo on it. I nudged Ryan and told him about the guy. Ryan looked over and said, maybe he's one of the workers. I said, he's not. He was in the woods during the hayride. Ryan shrugged and said, maybe he's a dad. I wanted to believe that, but he wasn't talking to anyone, just standing there. A few minutes later, when I looked back again, he was gone. Around 9 o'clock, if I had to guess, most of the little kids had gone back to their cabins. The event was winding down, but Ryan and I still had energy. We decided to walk around the resort before going in. There was a trail behind the cabins that led into the woods. Ryan said we should go a little way in to do something scary for Halloween before the night ended. I didn't want to go too far, but we had flashlights, and I didn't want to look like a coward. So we walked down the dirt path together, laughing and daring each other to keep going. The farther we went, the quieter it got. The sounds from the resort faded until it was just the crunching of our shoes on the path. We only went maybe 200 feet in when we stopped near a clearing. There was an old wooden sign nailed to a tree that said private property. We started throwing small rocks at the sign and pretending to summon ghosts or something dumb like that. Then we both heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps coming from behind us. Somewhere
Sorry
deeper
about
on the
that.
path.
Cats are knocking over the cat
We
food.
froze and turned around. Ryan whispered, probably another kid. It didn't sound wanted to believe that, but he wasn't talking to anyone. We went back to the lodge where they had more games and food.
I have to rewind
My
it.
parents sat by a bonfire while Ryan and I went around collecting candy. Everything seemed normal again. About an hour later, I saw him again. Ryan and I were standing near the snack table when I noticed someone off to the side of the crowd. It was the same man. He wasn't close, maybe 30 feet away, but he was standing near the tree line, watching again. There were a lot of people around, so it felt strange that he'd just be standing there alone. I remember my stomach tightening when I realized he was looking in my direction. I tried to get a better look at his face, but it was hard because of the lighting. I could make out a short beard, and I think his hat had some kind of logo on it. I nudged Ryan and told him about the guy. Ryan looked over and said, maybe he's one of the workers. I said, he's not. He was in the woods during the hayride. Ryan shrugged and said, maybe he's a dad. I wanted to believe that, but he wasn't talking to anyone, just standing there. A few minutes later, when I looked back again, he was gone. Around 9 o'clock, if I had to guess, most of the little kids had gone back to their cabins.
I think I'm watching one more and getting off here because my cat's driving me nuts
The
trying to
event
get
was
into the
winding
food.
down, but Ryan and I still had energy. We decided to walk around the resort before going in. There was a trail behind the cabins that led into the woods. Ryan said we should go a little way in to do something scary for Halloween before the night ended. I didn't want to go too far, but we had flashlights and I didn't want to look like a coward. So we walked down the dirt path together, laughing and daring each other to keep going. The farther we went, the quieter it got. The sounds from the resort faded until it was just the crunching of our shoes on the path. We only went maybe 200 feet in when we stopped near a clearing. There was an old wooden sign nailed to a tree that said private property. We started throwing small rocks at the sign and pretending to summon ghosts or something dumb like that. Then we both heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps coming from behind us, somewhere deeper on the path. We froze and turned around. Ryan whispered, probably another kid. But it didn't sound like a kid. Whoever it was walked with weight, like an adult. I shined my flashlight down the path. The light only went so far, and I couldn't see anyone yet. Then the footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, it was completely silent. Then a voice spoke. It said, "Hey there, boys." It was a man's voice. Calm, but somehow intimidating. Ryan looked at me, and I think he realized the same thing I did. It was the man from the hayride. He stepped into the light just enough for us to see part of him. Same black jacket and hat. "What are you two doing out here?" he asked. "You like candy?" Neither of us said anything. He pulled something out of his pocket and held it up. I could see the orange wrapper. It was a Reese's cup. "I got a bunch more of these in my cabin," he said. "Come on, I'll give you some." Ryan took a step back. I remember his face going pale. The man took a few steps closer and then said, "You don't have to be scared. It's Halloween. I'm just giving candy out. I saw you boys on the hayride earlier." When he said that, my stomach basically dropped. I grabbed Ryan's arm and whispered, "Run." We both turned and sprinted down the path toward the resort. I could hear him behind us for a second. His footsteps were pounding hard as he started to chase. I didn't dare look back. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. The path seemed longer than before. When we reached the edge of the woods, I could finally see the lights from the resort again. I yelled for help as we ran out of the trees and back toward the crowd near the bonfire. A few adults turned toward us, startled. We didn't stop until we got right up to the people. I turned around, expecting to see the man behind us, but he wasn't there. The path was empty. My parents came over right away, asking what happened. I told them everything, about the man watching me on the hayride, seeing him near the trees, and then following us into the woods. Ryan confirmed it all. My dad and another man grabbed flashlights and went to check the path, but they didn't find anyone. A few workers searched too, but he was gone. The resort staff called the local police to report what happened. They arrived about 30 minutes later and took statements from me, Ryan, and our parents. They said they'd check the area, notify nearby cabins to keep an eye out. That night, my parents didn't let me out of their sight. We stayed in the cabin with the door locked. I couldn't fall asleep for hours. Every noise outside made me jump. The next morning, the police came back and told us they searched the property but didn't find anyone matching the description. No vehicles had been reported missing, and no one fitting that man's description had checked in. They thought maybe he was a trespasser from outside the resort. We left later that day. I remember staring out the car window as we drove past the woods, half expecting to see him standing there again. For weeks after that, I kept thinking I saw him, on the side of the road, outside stores, even once at my school parking lot, but it was always someone else, or at least I hope it was. Ryan and I kept in touch for a while. He told me he couldn't sleep for days after it happened. Nothing ever came of this. The police never called again. The man was never identified or caught. Now I'm older, and when I think about that night, what scares me isn't what he did, it's what he could have done. If we had believed him for even a second, if we had walked toward him instead of running, I don't think I'd be here to tell this story. And every Halloween since then, whenever I see someone standing alone at the edge of a crowd, I always think of that man. Sometimes people who look like they're part of the fun are watching for a different reason.
Damn, bro. One last story, and then I'm getting off here.
My name is Roger, and this happened to me on Halloween night 3 years ago. I'm 29 and work a boring office job, but it's good pay. When this happened, I was getting stuck with the stuff. Beginner's time off, the shifts nobody wanted, etc. So when Halloween, my favorite holiday, rolled around, I was actually quite excited. It was never easy being the new guy at work, so I was wanting to enjoy a night of seeing kids be kids and chilling out at home watching movies. At the time, I was living alone in a small house on the outskirts of town with my girlfriend, but she was out of town with her parents. It wasn't isolated exactly. I had neighbors, but the street got really quiet once the trick-or-treating hours ended. The families in the area usually shut their lights off around 9 p.m. Since I didn't have kids, I just handed out candy until the crowd died down. On several past Halloweens, before I got my own place, I was quite used to the occasional ding-dong ditch prank. That's why there is a trick and treat here and there. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday, and I remember it was chilly but clear out. By 10:30, I was lounging on my couch, half watching a horror movie while picking through a bowl of leftover candy. I hadn't seen anyone in about an hour, so when I heard a faint knock at my side door, I assumed it was stragglers. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Just the empty driveway and the faint rustling of leaves. I brushed it off. Kids play pranks all the time on Halloween. I headed back to my living room to finish watching The Conjuring 2. 15 minutes later, I heard the same sound again, only this time it was coming from the back door, the one that led to the small deck. That set off alarms in my head because nobody used that entrance. I froze in the living room, listening. The TV was off now, and I could hear it clearly. The metal rattle of the back doorknob being tested, slowly and cautiously. Whoever was trying my door was either checking if it was locked cautiously or believed it was unlocked and trying to be quiet. I crept into the kitchen, staying low, and that's when I saw him through the window. A man was crouched down near the door, wearing dark clothes and a cheap, cracked Halloween mask pushed up on top of his head. In his hand, he held a crowbar. He wasn't trying to hide. He was deliberate and calm, like he knew I was inside and didn't care. I backed away quietly and grabbed my phone, whispering to 911 what was happening. The operator told me to stay on the line, lock myself somewhere safe, and not to engage. I didn't want to make noise by slamming the doors upstairs, so I stayed crouched at the top of the steps, clutching a kitchen knife, whispering updates. I peeked down and saw the man move away from the back door. That's when I heard the faint pop of a window screen being pried off. He was at the basement window now. I whispered to the dispatcher, he's at the basement. My voice was shaking. She told me officers were already on their way. Then came the worst moment. I heard glass crack. He was breaking the window. My blood ran cold, and it wasn't just a smash and grab. He knew I was there, and most burglars typically don't try to enter a home where they know someone's still inside. Minutes felt like hours. The dispatcher kept me talking quietly to make sure I was still okay. I heard footsteps crunching outside. The man was circling the house again. Then, headlights swept across the blinds. Relief flooded me as flashing red and blue lights pulled up in front. The man bolted. I watched him sprint across my yard, but he didn't get far. The officers tackled him just past my driveway. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I saw one of the cops leading him back in cuffs. That's when I saw what he'd been carrying. The crowbar, duct tape, and zip ties stuffed in his bag. This wasn't a burglar looking for valuables. This guy had a plan, and it was something far worse. The police told me he had a long record of breaking into homes, and that he was suspected in some other cases where people had gone missing. To this day, I hate being home alone on Halloween. It's supposed to be about scares and fun, but whenever I hear footsteps or knocking outside at night, I can't help but remember everything about this night. The part that chills me the most is if the police had been just 5 minutes later, I might not be here to tell the story. The police later followed up weeks later. They told me what they found in his backpack. He had a Colt .45 handgun, several kitchen knives, and rope.
It's crazy. Alright guys, I'm gonna do this tomorrow. Again, we're gonna watch some scary stories and stuff. So I hope everyone has a good night, and I hope this video gets a lot of clicks and likes, and please subscribe to me. I do gameplay too on Minecraft. I sometimes do horror mods on there as well. If you like me and you enjoy stuff like this, let me know in the comments. Bye!